Hello, everybody, and welcome back with episode 12 of the Pursuit of Precision podcast. Today, we were so fortunate to have time to speak with Keith Nichol, a former Division I football player at Michigan State University and now business owner of Carrera Capital, a financial services company that he is very excited to continue to grow in the same trajectory that his financial career has started off. So this was an amazing interview. You're not going to want to miss this one. Let's head to that episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pursuit of Precision podcast. My name is Ryan Jaros, and over the next 12 months, I'm going to be interviewing 50 of the most successful, intelligent, influential, and overall happy people that I can in order to hear their story and share with all of you guys what I learned along the way. So today we have our wonderful guest, Keith Nichol. Thank you so much for making the time to be here today. We're super excited to have you.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me.
No problem. So we like to start out with bragging on you a little bit.
Yeah.
Want to kind of paint the picture. Obviously, this is going to go out to the masses and people all over the world. So not everybody knows Keith Nichol as well as they should. And so I'm going to introduce you if you don't mind.
Appreciate it. No problem.
All right. So Keith played Division I football at Michigan State University, where he received several athletic and academic all Big Ten honors. He excelled as a top-performing advisor for Northwestern Mutual, earning awards in Top 100 magazine as Top 100 People in Finance and number one advisor in class through his first 4 years. Keith most recently launched his own private wealth management company, where he serves as president and CEO. Carrera Capital advises business leaders, professional athletes, entertainers, and professionals of all trades. Lastly, or firstly, depending on how you look at it, Keith is a husband to, is it Adriana? I want to make sure I say that correctly. And a father to 2 young children. So I'm sure that's very important to you as well.
That's the most important.
That's
we just welcomed our third about 6 months ago.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yep.
Congratulations.
It's busy at the house right now.
I would say so. Holy smokes. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys. Well, obviously a very impressive man, and we're very grateful to have you on here. And so I always set the stage for where you're at today to just kind of say, hey, he's obviously been through a lot. He's had a lot of success. He's done a lot of great things. He's married. And I think that plays into success in a lot of ways, to be honest with you. Showing that someone's married, has a family, has a business, has done all these things. I think it all speaks to who you are as a person. So very impressive. And so I want to go back now. So we've got all these great things. You got a beautiful car, I'm sure. You make great income. You live in a great city. You have a wife. You have kids. You play Division I football. You have all these accolades and things that you've done in your life. Could you take us back to day one of before you had any of those things? Before you maybe had any of your first big wins? What would that look like? That could be college for you. That could have been when you were 13. That could have been when you were 8, depending on when you started having success in football. But could you take us back to what that looked like?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has these pivotal moments in their life that change the course in the direction of where they'll end up. And for me, I grew up in a small town. So Lowell, Michigan's where I'm from, just outside of Grand Rapids.
Okay.
Which is a small town, but a very proud town, an agriculture-driven town. And but sports was everything there, especially football. And there's a massive tradition of successful football there.
Cool.
In particular, wrestling as well. So I think they have like dynasty going right now where they have 8 years in a row of Division II state championships that are going with multiple All-Americans that have gone on into college. And so kind of it's a blue-collar town with tough type athletes.
Yeah.
And, for me, I was a skinny, scrawny kid.
Not anymore, but
yeah, I was. Trust me, I was. And so, God gifted me with certain athletic abilities. Could always run and jump and do all those things. And I was gifted at the quarterback position young. But the crossroad for me was in high school, after an undefeated freshman season, going into a quarterback competition in high school as a sophomore at a school that had never had a sophomore starting quarterback really lead them on. So, I ultimately won that position through a tough camp, and we went on to play a team called Grandville, which they were ranked in the country at the time. They had kids going to Michigan State at the time. Andrew Hawkins was a kid there who ended up being a teammate of mine. And why this is so important was, I'm not sure how much support the town gave myself as an unknown kind of freshman or sophomore coming in.
Yeah.
to take over the helm of a very proud, football program, with guys that were much older than me wanting that position. And so, went to that first game and blew the doors off those guys. And, that was like the most pivotal moment for me. It was a big win, my sophomore season in football. And that really like laid the landscape, to change my life.
Yeah.
Which had a bunch of, peaks and valleys prior to that. So that first win, which sounds kind of crazy looking back at where we're at now.
No, it makes total sense, because I think that I think that's a huge misconception that people have, is they think that you've just always been the person you are today.
Yeah,
you've built all these wins and these successes, and you've stacked them over time.
Yep.
And so that's why I like to go back to this, and because it is one thing I feel like I've noticed is that win to you at that point in your life was just as important as maybe opening your own company right now.
Oh,
at
totally.
that point in your life. It's all perspective, right?
It may be more important because, if somebody doesn't take a chance on you, and for me, that was the head coach of Lowell at the time, Noel Dean, and the supporters that I had in my camp, pushing for that. If I don't win that position, or if we don't win that game, maybe football isn't a part of my life, and football has given me everything in my life up to this point. When you think about the relationships, the contacts, business, there's a tie to it in some component almost at every crossroad. And so that was critical when you look back on it. And it's that fragile too at the same time. You need people to believe in you, but you also need to capture the opportunity when people do believe in you.
Have you taken the time to think about maybe what you did that made him believe in you in the first place?
The things that my head coach valued the most were, discipline, work ethic, effort, attitude, the things you control. And I bought into that early, as even a young kid coming up through middle school. And I praised these guys that were ahead of me. I wanted to be just like them. And those are the characteristics that these successful athletes had in my community. And so I bought into that early, showed that, worked relentlessly. My dad was a massive part of that too. He wasn't a military guy, but high discipline, structure, big time work ethic. He was up at 4 a.m. Every day that I, was aware of him.
My dad's the same way. I'm trying to tell him to sleep more right now.
Yeah,
currently.
right.
I'm trying to talk him into it.
Those people, they set the tone and the attitude for your life. And I just, I want to be like them. So I think those characteristics and buying into the process and the system really helped give me the best opportunity to win that chance.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and it is special though to think about you going and doing that on your own, you recognizing that at what, 14, 15 you would have been? 15 maybe? Is that how old you are?
Yeah, well, you buy in earlier than that, but the chance that I received was, the joke was, my mom's dropping me off to football practice, on the varsity team and the whole thing. And so, we went on to have an undefeated season. I think the biggest point spread or differential between us scoring points versus points allowed maybe ever in the state. One of the more dominant teams with a bunch of talent. We win a state title my sophomore year, and then, kind of the rest is history in terms of successes that come there.
Yeah. So what, I guess I have a question in regards to that. So what do you feel that you learned so much in that time where I think the reason I see it as pivotal is because before that you hadn't really had a success to stack on top of that, right? Is there something that you maybe took from that first initial success that you had in terms of going on and continuing through the season? You didn't just get the opportunity, you succeeded, right? Through the end of that season, you guys were undefeated. Is there something that you took from that initial, like a mindset or something that you feel like changed the way that you thought at that time?
Yeah, I don't, so through my freshman and sophomore year, we were undefeated in both seasons, so I hadn't experienced a loss. Okay. But God always gave me this uncanny understanding of how fragile and how difficult it is to win. I never took winning for granted, and I never assumed that we were ever going to win.
Yeah.
Again, I bought into the process of what it takes to put yourself in a position to win, and I didn't take that for granted. And so, we get to my junior year, and understanding how fragile things can be.
Yeah.
I won't go on to have a pretty difficult ankle injury on the latter part of our season, which ultimately ended our season in the middle of the playoffs against a pretty good team, which if I'm healthy, I think we win that game, but without it, like one roll of your ankle and, the season ends, kind of for everybody. And that's like how fragile and how difficult it can be to win is one of your key guys getting injured or whatever.
Yeah, one guy.
It can be one guy. And that could have been the story on the other side if their key guys get hurt, And so it's peaks and valleys and never taking that whole process for granted. But perseverance is what matters the most, in the end. And pushing forward every single day.
Well, and you even said it before. I think controlling what you can control is everything, because at the end of the day, there's no control over what happens to your ankle or what happens to the other quarterback's ankle for that matter, right?
Right.
So I think that is honestly the secret to that situation, is the fact that you did everything you could within your power, and the rest kind of played itself out. You can't control the results of what happens after that, but you controlled what you can control.
Yeah,
so that's
you can't dwell on things that you can't control. So if you pour all of your effort and energy into being the best version of yourself every single day, you can sleep well at night. And that's how I've lived my whole life since I was a young kid. It's just pour everything you can and be the best version of yourself every single day. Stack up the wins every single minute, hour, day, week, month, years. And that starts to compound on itself.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite quotes is from, I think it's Vince Lombardi, who, summarizing this a little bit, is like the greatest moment in a man's life is when he lays on the battlefield, depleted of his energy, knowing he's given it his all.
Yeah.
And so like, that's how I think about it. Like, you can sleep well at night knowing you've given the world everything you got.
And the result doesn't matter.
You can't control the result every time.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Well, I think transitioning into your later years, how did you start to stack that? And the reason I'm getting at this is, did you start to pick up on some habits or things that were creating that success, or things that allowed you to stay consistent? Because it's one thing to be lucky and win once. It's another thing to have a process to actually repeat that success over and over again. So I'm curious if you started to pick up on that at that point in time. Were you starting to develop a routine at that point in your career as an athlete, at least?
Yeah. So why I hope my kids go into athletics has nothing to do with the fame or fortune that it can potentially provide. It's all about the life lessons that it provides, the disciplines and all those things, because that's ultimately what's going to carry you for the rest of your life and hopefully the next generation and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so football, unbeknownst to me at the time, provided the foundation and the structure, the discipline and everything. Every day you're structured. You wake up, you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing, that somebody else created that structure.
Yeah.
And you just go execute.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Now when that goes away, you have to look back and say, well, nobody's creating this structure for me. I got to go create it for myself and for everybody else that's around us on our team, so that we give ourselves the best chance to win. If you don't, you'll ultimately set yourself up for failure.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. So moving into, you had that injury junior year, correct?
Yep.
How did you rebound from that? I'm sure there were a lot of questions in your head of, hey, can I still do this when I come back? And you maybe were a little tentative on that ankle. How did you deal through those emotions at that time?
Yeah, I mean, it's you're battling through, and you're never making an excuse, and played on that thing and beat it up pretty good. So there's a recovery process after the season, and the tough moments about all that is like you feel like you let everybody down, and the senior class that was above you, those guys, leaning on you to come through, and there's nothing you can do, and that's a bad feeling. So what it does is it provides more motivating factors going into what would be now my senior year, and we had a very successful season and played a very talented team in Muskegon. We had a big game. I think there's 20,000 people at the game, and battled it out. And so it's just, everybody has peaks and valleys in their life. And for me, that would have been, definitely a valley.
Yeah.
And then we go into a peak towards the senior season. Didn't end up winning in that state playoff game. But then that takes me into, college and, having a chance with the Bears and the Redskins and Lions for tryouts and things. And what you do is you don't become numb to it, but what you do is you find solace in the process and fall in love. For me, it was the process. Like, I love practice. I love the structure. I loved, again, being the best version of myself every single day.
Yeah.
And pouring myself into what we were trying to do every single day. That's what I loved. Like, I don't think about the games. I think about the practices and the locker room, and that's
the whole
what
experience.
You think about. Exactly.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Well, I want to go back to that point and that injury, because I feel like through hearing you talk about it, what got you out of it was mostly the value that you hold in others, right? And the value, how much you value other people, how much you want to serve other people. Where did that come from? Because at the end of the day, like you said, or like when you were explaining that situation, it was not about, oh, poor me, it hurts. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to play. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to help out. You immediately were like, my team's counting on me. Where was that something that was instilled from your family growing up, or?
Yeah,
Where did that come from?
It's probably a couple of things, and I think it's one. I think selflessness. Maybe you're born with some of that in some capacity, but it's certainly a product of your community and your parents, and the community I was brought up in, and the parents that I was brought up with was a selfless mindset that you're there to help everybody succeed around you, and if they succeed, that means you succeed. Yeah. And that was the mentality. Nobody's greater than the team. Like that whole kind of old school mindset, which hopefully our world captures a little bit more. I'm hoping of, and what's becoming more of a selfish world, it feels like at times. But yeah, it was a very much like team first, family first, and you're a piece of the puzzle. You're not the whole puzzle.
Yeah.
So I felt like just growing up in our community, having that mentality really helped shape and form even who I am today.
Yeah, I mean, and they say your willingness to do something for others is usually higher than what you're willing to do for yourself. When it comes down to it, if someone was in trouble that you really care about, for example, your mom, your dad, you'd be willing to go above and beyond and do more than what you would truly do for yourself in that situation. Yep. So that just speaks to that right there.
Yep, and it'll carry you so far in business if you go into it with the mindset of how can I help this guy succeed or this family succeed? Yeah. How can I put other people in a position to win? Well, you'll make sure that you win, because if you have a winner's mentality, you'll make sure that they'll win. And by virtue of doing that, everybody wins. And it's just the way to go in my mind. Some people might not agree, but that's what I do.
No, appreciate the honesty for sure. I want to now go into that transitionary period for you. So you were in senior year, you had a good year. What did the process look like in terms of, am I going to play college? Do I want to play college? What did that look like for you? Is that something that you always knew was going to be next for you, or talk me through that phase in your life?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, we had a bunch of success my sophomore year. Mm-hmm. And because of everybody winning, there's attention that was brought to myself through that. Yeah. And scholarships and offers and national notoriety came on quick and heavy, which I was very fortunate to have, but at the same time, it was very new because our community wasn't accustomed to that. Yeah. So, but received offers shortly after my sophomore season from Big Ten schools, Notre Dame, West Coast teams, East Coast. I mean, it was overwhelming and exciting at the same time. But
that's an underlying purpose that I would assume was driving you as well, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's overwhelming at times because you're kind of like, I want this thing to end, which was part of me committing to Michigan State early before my junior year. Yeah, that was because I was like, I'm kind of done with this recruiting thing. Like, I'm just tired of the phone calls and the visits. And at the end of the day, I wanted to go play at Michigan State. That's where my family went. I grew up with the Michigan State flag in my front yard. Drew Stanton was at Michigan State, if you remember him. And so that whole system, I really wanted to do that. Yeah. So I committed to Michigan State. John L. Smith ends up getting fired after kind of a lackluster couple of seasons. And then Oklahoma comes knocking again, and I commit and go there. Okay. Simply because Michigan State didn't have a coach. They fire him, and they're in a transitionary period, and they're just looking to hire, I think, Coach D'Antonio. So I went to Oklahoma, get into a quarterback battle with Sam Bradford, who was a year older than myself. He's unknown at the time, wasn't a big recruit. I was fortunate to be an All-American, a 5-star recruit, and Elite 11, if the viewers are familiar with what all those things are. So coming in as a highly touted recruit, Sam's a year older, more accustomed to the program a little bit. He gets the nod about a week prior to the first game, so we took it all the way to the end pretty much, and he takes off like a rocket ship. Like, the team is loaded with NFL talent, himself included. Yeah, and he's perfect for him. He has a great season. I stick through that season, played about 6 games. So my red shirt was burned. I was the only freshman that actually played that year. And a lot of success that year. But I'm also looking at it like, I want what's best for the team. Sam's what's best for the team. I'm not going to sit around hoping that a guy gets hurt or leaves for the NFL.
Yeah. That's a really, you're going through it so humbly, but that is such a mature way to look at that situation compared to how many other people would have been in that situation and thought exactly what you just said there, where, hopefully something happens where I get the opportunity, or only thinking about themselves. So yeah. I just want to recognize that first off.
And don't get me wrong. There was selfish moments in there too, where you're like, you're in a state far from home, in a community that's very different than the one you grew up in. And you're starting to wonder if you made the right decision, and a lot of things run through your head.
Yeah.
But knowing the team was in a great spot with him, and they had other great quarterbacks behind myself and other guys coming in, I'm looking at it like, at some point you have to look out for yourself in some capacity, try to find a place that you think you give you the best chance to, for me, try to go on to the NFL after football was all done.
Yeah. So
you have to play it in order to do that. So I'd look to, transfer, and Michigan State, Coach D'Antonio had always, kept the door open. There was an olive branch extended, and, I came back home, which ended up being a massive blessing. And me coming to Michigan State, when I really look at it, any success in business, the relationships I have, my wife, my family, is all connected to Michigan State and to football, like at every crossroad. Yeah. In some way, shape, or form, no matter how many forks and turns there are, it always kind of goes back to one place.
Yeah.
But the fork in the road that led me to college football was through my high school experience. And so you reflect on all these things that kind of go your way or don't go your way, and it gets to where you're at today. And it's, God has his purpose for the believers, and that are listening to this, is like, I believe that there is, we have our own plan, but there's a greater plan out there for you.
No doubt. That is special. I can't help but think about that phase where you were in high school, and it seems like you had such a vision for what your future was going to look like, to a general sense. Obviously, You wanted to play football, you wanted to do it in college, maybe play at MSU. You had a really clear vision for like where this thing's going to go, and even more so, you almost had an idea of exactly where it was going to go at such a young age. You were 15 years old, knowing I'm going to go play. Things changed, but you knew that you were going to go play football at MSU at 15 years old.
Yep.
Knowing what you're going to be doing at 23 or 22, call it.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild, right? Do you think there's a lot of value for those watching at home, regardless of if they end up playing football or if they end up playing any sport or anything that they do whatsoever? Do you think that was really valuable in a general sense, that you had such a clear vision for where you wanted to take, where you were going to be in those future years?
Yeah, I think, of course, it's very important. And one of the things that I was given early as a gift, was I was always a visionary, and kind of a dreamer. And so there's always like this playbook or a dream of how I thought things were going to go, and then I would also kind of reverse engineer how I thought I was going to get there.
That's how I think.
And then what ends up happening, and this goes back to kind of my belief in that there's a greater plan, is that what ends up happening on the back end seems to always be better than whatever my personal vision was, or dream was. And so for those things, that's what I'm always just very grateful for where life is today, because I know it could be a very different life had, if one person didn't believe in me back when I was 14 or 15 years old, my life could look completely different. Who knows where I'd be? Who knows what my family dynamics would be? And so I'm very grateful for all those crossroads.
Oh, absolutely. So walk me through, I want to hear kind of how the phases went through. So obviously each level you were facing challenges all the way through, right? So you're at, you go to your initial school, things don't work out, you're going to go back to MSU. What are your thoughts at that point in time? Do you feel like you were regressing at that point in time mentally? Do you feel like, oh my gosh, I missed an entire year playing as a starter? What am I going to do when I get to MSU? Or what was that? What was your mindset going through those years?
This goes back to my belief in disciplines and controlling what you can control.
Yeah.
And so what I slept every night, I slept well at Oklahoma, knowing like I gave that program and myself every single day the best version of myself, 110% effort, and some, because they pulled some effort out of you too.
Yeah.
I gave it everything I could, and because of that, I felt good. I was like, I don't know what I could have done differently.
Yeah.
So then you just take the information in front of you and move forward the best you can. Because if you start to say, well, if this one my way, that one my way, that's not going to get you anywhere. You got to look forward and move forward. Don't look in your review ever, unless you're going to learn from it. But just move forward. And so, regressing, no, because again, I looked at it like I didn't redshirt my first year. I guess I'm playing experience. I know that if I transfer, I'm going to have to redshirt, and then I'm going to come out of that as a redshirt sophomore, which is the glide path. 90% of football players kind of go through is start really meaningfully playing when they're about redshirt sophomores or so.
Okay, got it.
In their third year, and so I'm kind of on a normal glide path now. My vision was to play early and often, right? As a true freshman, played early, just not as often as I wanted.
Yeah.
And so, going to a QB competition with Kirk Cousins, who's at Michigan State at the time. Again, an unknown guy.
Have you heard of him?
Yeah, maybe a couple of people have heard of him. We're very different athletes. I was a kind of a running dual threat type of an athlete and quarterback. He was a very pro style pocket quarterback, probably a great fit for our offense. But we battle it out. And the turning point in that fork in the road is, I go and dislocate my elbow against Illinois in a game that I had started. I think it's Kirk had hurt his ankle against Michigan in a game that we went back and forth on. And then you're sitting out 2 or 3 games. Kirk comes in, starts those games, takes off like a rocket ship, just like Sam did. And but again, what I slept well at night knowing was that I poured 100% of myself into getting me to where I was at. I can't control what I can't control.
Yeah.
There's a challenge at wide receiver. We lose some guys due to an off-field fight. They need some athletes at wide receiver, Coach D'Antonio, and then they asked if I'd be willing to move to that position, to wide receiver. And again, going back to my childhood, it was team first, everybody else first mentality. I want to win more than I want to play quarterback. And let's go, whatever you need. And the rest is history on that too. Started about 2.5, 3 years there at wide receiver. And, I enjoyed that process because I got to be a complete athlete on the field and impact the game in a completely different way.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a whole new world, I have to imagine. When was the last time that you didn't play quarterback?
Going back to high school, I played corner as well. So I played both ways in high school. So, but I never played wide receiver in my life. So that was the first time doing that.
That's crazy. It's like relearning to play the game, or just like getting a new opportunity to experience the game for the first time again is almost what that's like.
There's benefits to being a quarterback going to wide receiver too. You understand the offense, the playbook, you understand the reads, you understand what the quarterback's thinking. And, sometimes you're not doing exactly what you're coached to do, but it's for the benefit of the offense to help the quarterback because you just kind of understand what Kirk's thinking. And we had success, in
what he sees.
Kind of
I think that's the
things.
biggest thing. 100%. Is like, how can you replicate having known what he sees in that specific route? That's crazy to think about that perspective.
Yep. And then the cons are, you got to go out and learn the technique, and there's physicality to the position that you got to, buy into. Yep. No, it was a great experience all the way through.
That's wild. That's really cool that you were able to do that. I still am at a loss for words of your willingness to be able to do whatever it takes for the team first is just something that I think you're kind of brushing under the rug, but I don't think that's as common as you think. So that's a really special trait that you have, that you're willing to do that. Because I think there's so many people that, as you said, you got so lucky with all these opportunities and all these situations is how you've been framing it. But the reality of it is you made a lot of good decisions and had a good mindset no matter what all the way through, because your career could have stopped how many different times because of these roadblocks. It could have stopped at Oklahoma because you didn't want to swallow your pride and go somewhere else. It could have stopped when they didn't want you to play quarterback. It could have stopped at a number of different times, but you did the right thing. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I was fortunate that we had a good group of guys and a lot of successes and wins, and a lot of the pieces of the puzzle fit. And I was really proud to be a part of that. Yeah. I wanted to switch gears just a tiny bit. Because we haven't dove into academics whatsoever. What was that like? I mean, I was a college athlete myself, and so I understand how much there is to juggle in those situations. What was that like for you? Juggling, I would assume, having great care for what you do on the football team, and in addition to what you do in the classroom.
Yeah, there's a ton of structure and discipline that's provided, and they want you to be academically successful.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons. And so the number of resources that are available to you are immense. Like, and I always looked at it like, some guys are smarter than others, and that's fine. But with all the resources that are in front of you, there's no reason there should ever be a problem with not passing classes or whatever it might be. And I wanted to be, a great student. So I wasn't the guy skipping classes. I also want to set an example for my other teammates. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I was a 4.0 student, but I think I finished with a 3.5 or somewhere around there, and was proud of that. And I also knew that how I carried myself through college and the grades I had in college, in some capacity, would impact my future. I just didn't know yet. And I knew that successful people, alumni, watch how you carry yourself and how you do in the classroom, and you just never know who's watching you. So I always wanted to be the best version of myself, and in academics, I did that too.
Were you always multi-dimensional in terms of how you looked at which way your life could go, or were you so dead set on, hey, like, I'm going to the NFL? Where was your mind at that time?
Because of the early success that I had in high school, all I knew was success in football, and I had big visions and dreams of what I wanted my life to look